Hi everybody, I'm Jennifer Tryon, and today I'm going to walk you through how you can sew your own cloth mask. Before we get started, I want to caution you that cloth masks are not a replacement for N95 masks, and the recommendation is that you wear a cloth mask only as a last resort to protect others from COVID-19. For this project, you're going to need 100% cotton fabric, a rotary cutter, a ruler, along with a self-healing mat, some snips. I've opted for pipe cleaner. You could also use floral wire, even twist ties, and some 1/4 inch elastic. But you could also use bias tape. Okay, so let's talk about how much fabric you should use. I've got a few meters of fabric here, because what I've found works best for wasting less fabric is to use fat quarters. So if you don't have a fat quarter and you've only got yardage, fold your yard in half. I'd cut your fabric just a little over 18 inches, and then we'll go ahead and square it up after. Now, I'm willing to bet if you're making masks, you're probably making more than one at a time. So with your yardage folded up, I'd start layering up your fabrics and do a lot of your cutting at once. This is really going to help you save time. And just a tip is that yes, we love our gorgeous fabrics, but that men want to be able to wear masks too, and often don't want to have ice cream cones and flowers on their masks. So not to forget to put some more masculine prints or neutral colors in the fabrics that you're cutting as well. Okay, with our fabric layered up, it's time to square it up. So to get everything even, start with your selvage edge and get it as in line with a line on your mat as possible. So with that lined up, I'm just going to take off the very edge of all of those layers, which is why it's really important to have a nice sharp rotary cutter. Now I know I have a straight edge, so I can line that up exactly on my cutting mat and cut the sides. Remember, don't take off too much, especially if you're working with a fat quarter, because there isn't a lot of wiggle room if you want to make sure you're not wasting any fabric. About a 1/4 inch that you're taking off. So before you cut off the salvage edge, make sure you have at least 21 inches across. This is going to allow you to get 3 7-inch cuts and 2 9-inch cuts, making complete use of your fat quarter or your half yard folded over. Remember, nice pressure, quick cuts. All right, you want to make sure the fabric that you start with measures 21 by 18. The 21 measurement widthwise is going to allow you to get 3 cuts of 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then I'm going to turn my mat for this, cut for 2 pieces that are 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Essentially just cutting your fabric in half. And now each one of your fat quarters will make 2 masks because you need 3 pieces. See? 1, 2, 3. That's 1 mask. 1, 2, 3. That's another mask, and so on. So now you've got a big stack of fabric masks ready to sew up. This makes mask sewing much more efficient. So I'm going to show you how to put it together, but I'd recommend if you're making more than one at a time to do each step on each mask. Assembly lining it makes it much quicker. So you're going to start with 1 9 by 7 piece of fabric and take your second piece and go right sides together. Now you may want to do this step on your ironing board because I want you to iron this in half. I want you to be able to see that crease. So now we're creating the pocket for the back part of the mask. So just with my ruler, I'm going to mark 2 inches from each end on that crease line. And I'm only going to sew to that mark. I'm sewing on the Janome S7 Indigo machine. This is a great workhorse machine. You'll have no problem sewing masks and beyond with this machine. And the S7 comes with AccuFeed Flex. That's this foot right here. It has these little feet that you can see pull the fabric from the top, and the feed dogs pull it from the bottom at the same time, making for super accurate and fast sewing. So now I'm just using my scissors. I've stopped sewing at that mark. I'm just pulling my fabric forward to the next mark. Press our foot down. Sewing. Don't forget to back stitch. That just locks your stitch in place so nothing comes apart when it opens up. This machine also has the scissors, which is really handy. So you don't need to cut at the side and you don't need to bring your snips over. So now what we've done is we've created a pocket. We fold back each side on that seam. Now what we're left with is no seam here, which is great. It's a good habit to press after every step. And most seams love a bit of steam. So now this is the back part of our mask with the pocket that will go towards our face. Now's when we're gonna add our elastic. I've cut 2 pieces. You can cut your elastic anywhere between 9 and about 13 inches. You can measure your own ear to your face, but I like to have the elastic be a little bit longer so I can actually fasten it right behind my head. So I've got 2 pieces of elastic that are 13 inches, 1 for either side. Now with your ruler again, and once you've made a few of these, you may not have to measure every time. Just measure and mark about a 1/2 inch or lower down either side. This is where you're gonna put your elastic. I'm using clips, but you can use pins, and I'm just clipping that elastic in place, making sure that it doesn't twist, and bringing it down flat against my next mark. And I'm gonna do the same on the other side. Okay, now I'm gonna bring my 3rd piece of fabric, right sides down, and I'm going to, careful not to lose my place, and clip right where the elastic is. Just bring that 3rd piece right over top. Make sure everything is nice and even and that your elastic from the middle doesn't make your way out because we're gonna sew straight down the sides. So take your clip out, and I'm using a 3/8 inch seam allowance. And I'm gonna backstitch a couple of times over the elastic so it's nice and secure. Take your clips out as you go. I'm using the stop-start button here, not the foot pedal. It helps to have a machine that has nice features. And just flip it over and do the other side. See how that AccuFeed Flex is pulling that fabric? I'm barely touching it. This is really helpful when you've got something like elastic under there that you don't want to get bunched up. And see, it reverses. And now instead of back stitching, I love using the lock stitch. And this is a huge feature because when you're doing something like a mask and you don't want to have that line of 3 back stitches at the end going over top of your work because it starts to look bulky, instead you can use the lock stitch at the end and then it ties the stitch in place. So our elastics are on. I'm going to bring back my iron and I'm just going to make sure that the sides are pressed down and that everything is pulled out as far as it can go, nice and straight. You can really see the difference here in the one that has been pressed and the one that hasn't been pressed. So when you're sewing a nice flat seam, it's much easier than sewing a seam that hasn't been flattened. Okay, this is starting to look like a real mask. We've got the pocket now and the front. So next what we're going to do is we're going to flip in our seams. So I'm pushing in the corners with my finger and flipping in those seams. Just enough so that the elastic and the fabric are flush and going all the way across. Folding in the seams means you don't need to line your mask with bias tape, which saves you a lot of material. So your ends should look like this when you're done folding it in, with your elastic flush with your seam. You're going to do the same thing on the other side. You will get the hang of folding this in once you've done a few dozen. So we're going to bring this back to the sewing machine. I'm going to top stitch right along the edge. So I'm going ahead and taking off my AccuFeed Flex, and I'm actually adding the G foot, which is the blind hem foot. That comes with the Janome S7. And what that's going to allow me to do is sew directly on the edge, and it's going to make sure I don't go over. We're going to sew these 3 sides. So start with your bottom side and line it up along the little black fence and put your needle all the way to the left in the 0 position. I'm using a 3mm stitch. When I'm about 1 stitch from going off the end, I'm going to lift up my presser foot and I'm going to pivot with the needle down. That's going to allow me to have a perfect corner and no cut thread, so no bulky seams or loose threads on the corner. Then I'm going to put my presser foot back down and start top stitching again. See how using the blind hem foot prevents the fabric from slipping out and giving you that perfect top stitch seam along the edge of your project. Now, when you get to the bottom end, make sure that everything is staying nice and tucked under. Now this is where I'm going to use that lock stitch. When I get to the end, instead of back stitching, I'm going to press lock stitch on my last one. This way, instead of going back 3 stitches, it just ties it right in place. It saves me from having that sort of ugly row of extra stitches. Okay, just cutting. And now I've got 3 sides sewn. Now I'm going to take a pipe cleaner. A regular kid's pipe cleaner is a little bit too long for this mask. So all I've done is, rather than cut it, because I'd rather have the extra stability, I'm just folding it at the ends, at either end, and giving it a slight little twist so that it still stays nice and thin. And then I'm going to push it up as far as it will go into the top. I would take a look in and even try to get it underneath your seam and really push it up there. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change feet and I'm putting on the zipper foot. If you don't have a zipper foot with your machine, you can just use your regular foot, but try to make sure your needle goes over as far to the right as possible. I want to sew right up against that pipe cleaner. I've moved my needle all the way over to the right, so it's at a 9. And I'm stitching using the zipper foot right along that pipe cleaner. See how the pipe cleaner is right here, and the zipper foot is allowing for it to get right close up. And I'm just pressing that lock stitch button at the very end. It's going to lock that stitch in place. Just trimming my thread. This is great. Now I've got the pipe cleaner right up top. You can see it'll bend and hold its shape. So because the bottom is still open, you can go ahead and insert your furnace filter now if you want. I've just cut a 4x6 piece and put it in, but that's what the pocket's really there for, so that you can take the filter out and put a new one in. But because the bottom is open, I'm just going to put it in now. It's just a bit easier. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to top stitch this shut. So I'm going to go back to my blind hem foot. Remember to move my needle all the way over to the left, or you can put it in the 1/4 inch position, which is stitch number 4 on the S7. And we're just closing this right shut. And honestly, if this is your first time sewing, or if you're not an experienced sewer, don't sweat it if things aren't perfect. The point is that you've got something over your face to stop the virus. It isn't that your stitches are perfect every time. But once you sew up a bunch of these, I guarantee you will be a whiz by the end. Nothing helps you learn your sewing machine quicker than repeatedly doing a project. Okay, this is looking good. It's nice and flat. However, it's recommended that for particles to get trapped inside the mask that you have a zigzag. So what we're going to do now is bring our mask back to our ironing board, flip it so the pocket side is up, and fold the mask in half. And you can either press it lightly with your iron. Be careful ironing here too much, because if you put the filter inside already. And then I want you to fold up again. And then fold to your halfway mark, just the pocket line again, and press. So now when you flip it over, you can see the 1, 2, 3 lines. So now what I want you to do is to pinch that first line and bring it down halfway before the second line, about 1/4 inch, and just clip in place, or you can pin. And then that third line, same thing. That's why it helps to have the crease line, because then it really gives you something even to hold on to. You want your fold lines to be facing down, because that's the way your breath is going to go. So the pipe cleaner should be up here and your fold lines rippling down. You can give this a little press in place. Again, no steam if you've already put your filter in. All right, so bringing this back to our sewing machine, and again, we're going to top stitch down the end, and I like to go back one more time just so it's really secure. I'm gonna start sewing from the bottom and work my way up towards the pipe cleaner. You don't wanna run over the pipe cleaner with your needle. Now this is a lot of fabric that you're asking your machine to go through, so just go slow here. But you'll really notice with the S7, it's no problem doing these multiple layers at once. It's a real workhorse machine. So you can see I'm going through those 6-8 layers, no problem. And now I'm actually gonna back stitch down the entire strip. Just because I really don't want those folds coming out. Okay, we're almost done. Flip it, start at the bottom of the other side, and just top stitch the whole way up. Careful not to catch your elastic. There, it's done. To make life easy, I put a little paper clip on the back of the elastic on both sides. This way the mask can either go behind your ears, or you can stretch it right to the top of your head, above your ears. Then it doesn't hurt at all. Functional and cute. That's how you sew a cloth mask with elastic. Remember, these masks are not a replacement for N95 masks, and healthcare workers really shouldn't wear cloth masks. It's recommended that you wear a cloth mask if you're going out in public to protect others from COVID-19. Feel free to stop and rewind this tutorial or to download the written instructions. I'm Jennifer Tryon, and I hope this tutorial helps you stay safe.